Welcome, fellow and future metalheads, to The Metal Substance, a series about metal music and its history, created because serious music should be talked about in a serious way. I'm your host, call me Victor. I hope you're relaxing with something to drink. I certainly am, because my throat is in recuperation right now. I've been feeling a little sick, more than a little, actually. But in any case, I couldn't wait any longer. It's time to discuss Anthrax's Fistful of Metal, recorded in 1983 and released in 1984. This is a story about the birth of a band, my personal favorite of the Big Four, incidentally. And there's something fascinating about listening to Fistful of Metal today. Because today we know what Anthrax is going to become. We can hear the speed, the aggression, the sharp rhythm, and the start of the grooves that would eventually become the band's trademark. But at the same time, we get to hear a band that hasn't figured itself out yet, because this is far from the Anthrax of Among the Living, the one that's writing songs like Caught in a Mosh, Indians, and Antisocial. This is Anthrax before Anthrax became Anthrax. Uh, and it's what makes Fistful of Metal interesting, because behind it is a story of a young band from Queens, New York, trying to establish itself in the early 80s American metal underground. It's a story about thrash's development involving constantly changing musicians, uh, the New York hardcore scene, thrash metal's rise as a whole, and an independent record label that was helping to build a new American metal movement, which would eventually become the vanguard of an enormous explosion of metal's popularity as a whole. So let's go to the beginning. Anthrax was formed in Queens, New York in 1981 by guitarist Scott Ian and bassist Danny Lilker. Ian had been born Scott Rosenfeld in 1963 and had grown up listening to the heavy metal that was coming out of Britain, bands like Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, and the emerging new wave of British heavy metal, all important influences. Now, for a teenager in America in the 1980s, discovering these types of music must have felt, even today it feels like it, right? But it must have felt like discovering an entirely different world. This is before the internet. There's no streaming. There's certainly not any YouTube. If you wanted to learn about music, you had records, tapes, magazines, radio shows, record stores, and your friends who could perhaps introduce you to something you'd never heard before. But Ian and Lilker weren't satisfied with just listening to these bands. They wanted to form their own. And they did. The name Anthrax was apparently taken from a biology textbook because Scott Ian thought the word sounded sufficiently nasty for a heavy metal band. And it's important because it tells you a lot about the band's early mentality. They're not very philosophical. They want to be dangerous. Now, musicians would come and go. The original lineup included drummer Demi Weiss, but the band was continually experimenting with different singers and guitarists. Lilker would move from the guitar to the bass. Ian would stay on as primary rhythm guitarist. And they were, while going through these rotations, trying to figure out how to take the heavy metal that they already liked and that existed and make it faster and more aggressive. In this way, they were mimicking the same stories that other future members of the Big Four of Thrash were going through. Out in LA, you had Dave Mustaine, who was getting involved in the developing metal scene. He's going to be in Metallica for a couple of years before he's fired, and then he'll develop Megadeth. Speaking of which, in San Francisco, Metallica was creating their own version of this extremely fast heavy metal. And Slayer, also in California, were pushing the music to as dark and extreme a sound as they could find or figure out how to make. Now I always bring up these other bands in reference to each other in the videos about them, because I'm trying to emphasize how nobody sat down and literally said, like, wrote on a piece of paper thrash metal and like decided to create its components. It was a genre that was developing organically. Uh, across the world, but even in America at regional levels. These were all musicians who were taking influence from Judas Priest and Motorhead and the British metal and punk as well, and other underground styles, and trying to make them faster. So think of Anthrax as the New York region section of the emerging thrash movement. So things really started to take shape for Anthrax in 1982 when Neil Turbin joins the band. Now, he is not Anthrax's most famous singer. That would be Joey Belladonna, who will be their seventh vocalist, I think is the count. Uh, Neil Turbin, though, was interested less in singing than attacking the microphone, being shrieking, being high pitched, and that works really well with this early version of Anthrax that's not interested in subtlety but wanting to be fast and dangerous and extreme. And so Turbin is very important for Anthrax's early history. Uh, Finally, Charlie Bennett joins Anthrax in 1983. Probably the most important, if well, maybe not the most, but one of the most important moments in Anthrax's development, because he was interested in more than just playing the drums fast. He had a strong sense of rhythm that would help distinguish Anthrax's music from other thrash bands over the years. Because Anthrax, even when they're playing really fast, there is that feeling, that pull that they get on you, where you just feel like you've got to almost dance to it, and so much of that is Charlie's work, combined, of course, with Scott Ian's guitar. And so that's like the foundation of Anthrax as the years go by. And I said finally earlier, but I forgot Dan Spitz. So we've got Dan and Dan on lead guitar and bass, Charlie on drums, Neil Turbin on vocals, Scott Ian on rhythm guitar. Now, how do you get a record deal? Well, first, let's talk more about the New York scene. Very different musical environment from California. Heavy metal was there, but especially punk and hardcore was, because it's New York City, it's huge, and there's this network of small clubs and rehearsal spaces and record stores that people could play in, and you had independent promoters, underground musicians, and so the punks and the metalheads are really rubbing shoulders a lot in these spaces. And everybody is wanting more speed, more aggression. Everybody wants to get into it with their audience. There's an attitude in New York thrash compared to California thrash. Um, and so Anthrax records a demo and end up working with Ross the Boss Friedman of Manowar fame. And eventually the demo goes out to John Zazula, better known as Johnny Z. He was running Megaforce Records. He had already taken a chance on another band you may have heard of, Metallica, and was also interested in Anthrax. So they signed with Megaforce. They released the Soldiers of Metal single, which ends up selling thousands of copies. Now, Soldiers of Metal is an anthem about metal heads and running the night and whatnot. For this small underground metal band in 83 to sell thousands of records is very encouraging, because it demonstrated that people were willing to pay to buy their music. And so that's what opens the gateway to making an album, that being Fistful of Metal. Now, Fistful of Metal will get recorded at Pyramid Sound Studios in Ithaca, New York, produced by Carl Candy, who was the drummer for the Rods. And it sounds like a young underground metal band in 1983. It's loud and aggressive and unpolished. The guitars are really sharp. It's kind of abrasive. The drums feel very physical. Like you can. This is so. I feel so strange when I say this sometimes, but it's like with the drums, you're not hearing the sound that comes off of it, like the music sound. You're hearing the physical hitting part more than anything. And Neil Turbin is just attempting to blow out the speakers at every moment, it seems. It's not a particularly long album. It comes in at 35 minutes, which is good. There's not a lot of wasted space, open space. Anthrax just comes in and just kicks ass until the record is finished. So I'm going to go over 3 songs in particular. Opening track, Death Rider. Speed, that is the intention here. Speed, that is just, we are going to take the new wave of British heavy metal, we're going to accelerate it. We're going to play the guitar faster and the drums faster, and our vocals are going to get obnoxiously aggressive. There is metal thrashing mad. I mean, it's in the name, right? Just like some of the songs on Metallica's Kill 'Em All, Fistful of Metal has these anthems to metal itself that are not just fast, but they're also catchy, which is important because it's a way to hook a crowd. That's what they call it. They understand the value of a hook. And it's got a shoutable chorus. And a good chorus that the whole crowd can get in on can be really important to a band's success. And then, of course, there's the word thrash and thrashing right there, because that's what we end up calling the subgenre that Anthrax is going to be a major pillar of. Now, I don't think they sat down and said, we're making a new genre when they wrote this song, but it's what happened. And I also wanted to point out that there is the track I'm 18 on here, which is perhaps a little unexpected. That's an Alice Cooper song, but it is a signpost to the musical roots of this band. This is a song that was over a dozen years old, and plus this was a young band. So I'm 18 is a really appropriate song. And so the members of Anthrax, they liked classic hard rock. Charlie was a Neil Peart fan and would play along to the live albums of Rush. And what they were just doing is taking I'm 18 and making it heavier, showing, look, we're playing at double speed, but we're fundamentally rooted in rock and roll. That goes back to the groove, to the rhythm that I was talking about earlier. So the rest of Fistful of Metal is treading these same roads. Panic is frantic. Subjugator is heavy. Soldiers of Metal, which I mentioned earlier, is an anthem for the early metal underground. Death from Above, violence, military imagery, and more hallmarks of what will be thrash metal. There's also a short instrumental in here, Across the River, which is kind of interesting. But it's a very unsophisticated record, especially compared to what Anthrax would do later. I mean, this certainly is not Persistence of Time, right? But that's what makes this album interesting to listen to, because you're hearing a band in the process of still figuring things out. I also wanted to make note of this album cover. It's very vivid and visceral, isn't it? I mean, like with the tongue and the teeth and just all of it. This was banned. This was a banned image, at least in Germany, at the time. And even today, when I was pulling it up to, make this video, I had to override safe search to get at it. So they're a dangerous band in many ways. So after this album, Anthrax almost immediately began to change. Denny Ilker was fired, even though he was one of the originators of the band. And so that ends what you can maybe call you should call the first era of Anthrax. He's going to go on to form Nuclear Assault, which is another New York based thrash band. But we're not going to get into it here. They instead bring in Frank Bello, who becomes the more permanent bassist. Neil Turbin also is going to leave. He'll be out. And eventually Joey Belladonna will join Anthrax, and he's going to radically change the band's vocal identity. So there's like this almost a chasm of a leap that is made by Anthrax between this album and their second one, Spreading the Disease. So Is Fistful of Metal Anthrax's greatest album? No, I don't think anybody would ever say that. It's definitely not a place to introduce somebody to Anthrax. I think Among the Living is the obvious one. Um, Personally, I really like Persistence of Time. That's probably my favorite of theirs. But the point is, this record is important as a historical landmark because it's the beginning. And it's the only record that was made by the original Anthrax lineup. So that's important in its own way. Um, and it's also part of a larger story because Anthrax is not operating in isolation. As mentioned before, 83, 84, the American Middle Underground starts exploding. Metallica is releasing Kill 'Em All, Slayer is releasing Show No Mercy, and Anthrax is releasing Fistful of Metal. Even Megadeth was actually forming, even though they hadn't recorded anything yet. There were other New York thrash bands like Overkill that were getting started, and it's going to eventually turn into a nationwide phenomenon. And Anthrax brings its own combination of, yes, the old British heavy metal, but an American speed, an American punk attitude, and a really strong sense of rhythm. And these things are going to mix together to make Anthrax unique. Um, so, in conclusion, it's valuable because it shows Anthrax in the process of becoming. It's the moment where Anthrax is born. So thanks for spending time with me today. Please let me know anything you think I can do to make these videos better. Other stuff that's happening on the channel, I'm actually going to soon release my video just on the genre of thrash metal in general, and I've already started a little bit of writing on talking about black metal. I'm just going to talk about the first and second wave in a single video. So keep an eye out for that, and that'll open the way to talk about some black metal records, which I'm really looking forward to. Don't forget that there is no substitute for listening to the album yourself, and remember, history will be written by the victor.